Time for Legal AF After Dark Edition. Volume 1 of Jack Smith's Special Counsel final report is out, 140 pages, chock-filled of information as to why Jack Smith believes that he could have obtained a conviction at the beyond a reasonable doubt level against Donald Trump for election interference and conspiracy around it. He spells it all out in 140 pages. And my colleague, Karen Friedman Agnifilo, 30-year prosecutor for the Manhattan DA, and I batted it around only here on Legal AF. Take a listen. All right, perfect opportunity for our former prosecutor, best friend, podcaster, Karen Friedman Agnifilo, to talk about the role of prosecutors and what through her unique lens, speaking of unique lenses, through her unique lens, what Volume 1 said to her. How did it speak to you, Karen? And then what were your takeaways of it and its importance in history?
Yeah, so Jack Smith is required by statute to provide a report to the Attorney General of the United States and to Congress, and to talk about his investigation, what it is, what it isn't, why he brought certain charges, why he didn't bring certain charges. And this is what the law, the various statutes that make up the special counsel law requires him to do. The very law that, of course, Judge Cannon said is unconstitutional and does not apply, and he was unconstitutionally appointed, but that goes for Volume 2. So he was required to provide this report. This is what special counsels do, and sometimes they are released. And so, for example, we saw the report that was released about Joe Biden on the classified documents, that whole thing where that special counsel talked about things that were inappropriate, right? Talked about his mental acuity, et cetera. But that's what happens. You release these reports. Same thing with Bob Mueller, et cetera. So these reports are nothing new. The January 6th report, I was less excited to receive, although I 100% agree it had to be made public. We have to have this be a part of the official record of history. But I suspected, given the detailed indictments that have been filed, both the original indictment and then the superseding indictment, as well as Jack Smith's voluminous description of what the evidence was that he filed in the case, we sort of knew what the case was and what would be there. And so from that perspective, I certainly didn't see anything surprising or new that we didn't really know before in the report. The Mar-a-Lago, that report is the one I've always thought I really wanted to see, because that one has largely been a lot more not in public view because of the nature of that case, right? First of all, there was no hearings on it the way there were with the Select Committee in Congress, the Jan 6 hearings. So that's where a lot of the information came out of the January 6th one, but also because of the nature of that case with the classified documents, a lot of things in that case were done under seal, or the documents or the filings were redacted. And so there was a lot we didn't know in that case. And so that was a case I really thought would have been incredibly powerful to be released, given the egregiousness of Donald Trump's conduct, right? Donald Trump always had a one step removed from the violence of the January 6th case, right? And Jack Smith alludes to that in the report, that the reason he wasn't charged with incitement to, with the insurrection part of it, was because you have to have a direct correlation, this intention to cause the violence. And Jack Smith said that's one of the reasons he didn't pick that charge in this case. So that case, there was a little bit of one step removed. There was none of that with the Mar-a-Lago classified documents case, right? That was Donald Trump obstructing justice, lying, keeping things in ways that were just reckless, waving classified things around. I know we're talking about Volume 1, but I have to put it in context of why it is that I really wanted Volume 2, and Volume 1 I was less excited about, but happy that it got released finally. The thing about Volume 1 that was interesting, more than the 180 or so pages of the report, was Jack Smith's 4-page cover letter that he wrote. He accompanied it with a cover letter, something I don't recall ever seeing before. Normally, the report is the cover letter, if you will, with like an executive summary. But he wrote a letter, and I thought that was really interesting. In some ways, it was him defending his investigation. It's like he's been really attacked, and he felt that the prosecutors he's been working with, the special counsel, the assistant special counsels that he's been working with, the agents he's been working with, it was as if they were, he felt he had to defend the men and women working on that case because they've been under siege and attack and these accusations and all the things that Donald Trump and his followers have done. He had to defend them. And so that was what I thought was most interesting, was this vocal kind of defense of himself and of his people and of their investigation. And just to talk a little bit about what you said that was in that 4-page cover letter, that was somewhat interesting. I had to reread that sentence about that Jack Smith talked about when you said how he said he could get a conviction in the case. That's how I read it at first, but I had to reread it because it really isn't what he was saying. What he was saying was, but for Trump's election to president, there was sufficient admissible evidence to obtain and sustain a conviction at trial. Really what he was doing was he was laying out what the legal standard is that a prosecutor has to bring in a case. So, for example, we used to often say when we would not bring a case, you'd say, look, I don't feel the evidence shows that I could prove this case beyond a reasonable doubt. That's the kind of the negative version of this. And prosecutors, when you bring a case, it's because you believe that you have relevant, admissible evidence that because it's one thing to have a ton of evidence. If it's inadmissible, like it's hearsay or for other reasons it's not admissible, it doesn't matter. It's like it doesn't exist. So you have to have admissible evidence that's sufficient to obtain and sustain, meaning it has to sustain on appeal, right? To obtain and sustain a conviction at trial. So he was just really kind of reiterating what the standard is. And frankly, that he had enough evidence to convict Donald Trump beyond a reasonable doubt. And therefore, he felt it was to go forward. I think he also felt he had to justify his own kind of existence and approach to this case, because he said, I came to this without any preconceived notions, right? If I followed the facts and the law wherever they lead. And if the facts didn't show a crime, I wouldn't have brought a case. And it did. And the fact that he didn't bring this insurrection charge, I think really, and he went into some detail in the report about that. I thought it really showed that he was really taking this seriously, and where he didn't feel he had the facts and the law, he didn't bring those charges. He showed restraint. So it really kind of lends credibility to the fact that this wasn't political, that this wasn't just him looking for anything. Because if it was, he would have brought that and other charges as well. So look, he also explained, and I thought this was interesting, was there's nothing political about what he was doing, right? That it was the timing of things that just kind of crashed into each other, right? It was he was appointed special counsel, and Donald Trump decided to run for president again. I mean, those two things happened at the same time. So there was no way that this wasn't going to collide, if you will. And so he kind of explained all of that and put it all together in a way that I thought was very interesting and I think important, but also slightly, you could tell there's a little defensiveness that he feels he has to justify and defend his actions. And I think it's because there's a lot of people who, frankly, decided to reject this and bought into the Donald Trump MAGA playbook. So I thought the report, though, was good. I thought that it was important. It's an important part of history. I liked some of the things he talked about, like really defending the line prosecutors who worked on the case with him, and how important it is to apply the principle that no man is above the law. And that's the principle that they applied. And they can't control what the Supreme Court decides, right? They can't control what the public and how they're going to vote. That they talked about those two things. And they couldn't control that the Supreme Court was going to decide that one man is above the law. So what they did was they put politics aside, and they put all the things that they had no power over and control over aside and just did what prosecutors do, which is to, and what Jack Smith has always done. He's a career prosecutor, has never been in the private sector, at least to my knowledge. And he just did his job for the right reasons and did his job for the country. And this is where they came out, right? You apply these facts to the law, and Donald Trump, these 4 charges were utterly appropriate. So that was what I kind of took away from the report. That I thought it was an important part of history. I'm glad he laid it out in detail, and the cover letter I thought was really good to put it in context for people.
Yeah. My takeaways were similar. I think that it's I'm going to get the conviction, but for the unique circumstances of the voters sending Donald Trump back to the White House. Short of that, I had more than enough evidence to carry my burden and to bring the prosecution in good faith. I follow the edicts of the Justice Department and the federal prosecutorial guidelines. I always have. I'm apolitical. This is Jack Smith now. I would never be involved with anything that smacked of politics or not being independent. Merrick Garland never had any input or tried to Bigfoot me in any way in my prosecution. I brought these things because that's where the facts and the law led me. I thought it was interesting on the why I didn't bring the incitement, although who really cares at this point, because the whole case was going to go by the wayside anyway. It only mattered if he could actually get these cases tried. The delay that we'll talk about, once the dust settles about Merrick Garland, didn't help. All of the on purpose late filings by Donald Trump, filing motions to dismiss at the very last moment when they should have been really filed at the beginning of the cases, and courts letting them do it and having the immunity come up so late in the game, losing 9 months while Merrick Garland sort of fiddled around a little bit about whether he wanted to go after Donald Trump at all anyway. All sort of came together for me in volume 1. Nothing was really shocking. He downplayed, because I think that's the right thing to do when you're doing a final closeout memo. He didn't really go after the unindicted co-conspirators like originally Jeffrey Clark, and Rudy Giuliani and Bannon and the rest, because, he doesn't want to further indelibly mark them. He's already done that by way of the indictment, and he didn't think that was an appropriate thing to do during the closeout memo. He certainly thinks that Donald Trump is responsible for Jan 6th and the damage and personal injury and pain and suffering to law enforcement. He made that quite clear. I thought it was appropriate for Jack Smith to also say, if this is what you think happened to law enforcement by the Jan 6 mob, what do you think would have happened if they ever got inside and made their way into the Senate chamber, and they would probably just assassinated people, whoever they found? And he puts that squarely at the feet of Donald Trump, even though he said he didn't think, because of the issue of intent, he didn't think he was going to bring that's why he didn't bring the incitement charge per se, because he thinks Donald Trump definitely wanted to whip up that crowd, foment that discontent, and point that armed rabble at the seat of our democracy. But there's this, from a criminal prosecutor justice standpoint, did Donald Trump intend, like when he woke up this morning and he was shaving, did he intend to make that crowd, or at that moment, make that crowd go attack the Capitol? Was that a logical thought in his head? And that's the reason he didn't bring that. But that's sort of academic at this moment, and now knowing what we know about it. The question now, as we move to volume 2, is will we ever see the light? Will that ever see the light of day? I had a very spirited debate with Ben on Saturday, but I think he's probably coming around to my position now, because volume 2 has not yet been delivered on Mar-a-Lago by Merrick Garland. Special counsel Jack Smith asked him not to do it as part of his transmittal letter. Merrick Garland agreed with it because there's still 2 co-defendants who have an appeal. The scary part of this conversation is the 11th Circuit, I think, is now just sitting on the substantive issue that's very important to America. We're back. We do a full-length episode of that every Wednesday and Saturday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on the Midas Touch Network. We call it Legal AF for a reason. If you didn't know why before, now you know. 40 million people a month take a look at it. We're in the top 10 in the country, all because of you. And if you like everything about Legal AF, we appreciate you being here. Come on over to Legal AF, the YouTube channel, and hit the free subscribe button as well. We're doing 5 or 6 videos a day at the intersection of law and politics. It will be a hot corner during the next 4 years. So until my next Legal AF and the podcast, where you can pick up on any podcast platform as well, I'm Michael Popok, and I'm reporting. In collaboration with the Midas Touch Network, we just launched the Legal AF YouTube channel. Help us build this pro-democracy channel where I'll be curating the top stories at the intersection of law and politics. Go to YouTube now and free subscribe at Legal AF MTN. That's at Legal AF MTN.